Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Coaching Outdoor Podcast. Wherever you may be listening, welcome to another episode in Series 7. We're moving really nicely through this series, and we're very excited today, Anna Marie and myself, to invite here Hazel Farrer, who is a nature and wellbeing coach. And we're heading over to amazing Algarve in Portugal. And so welcome, Hazel. If you'd like to introduce yourself to our listeners and watchers, that will be wonderful.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I've lived in different countries and I've done many different careers. However, they're all with the theme of nature and well-being coaching. So at the moment, I'm here in Algarve, Portugal, and my main work is nature-based mindfulness and climate conscious coaches, both with adults and with children, online and in person as well. So yeah, I go back quite a lot to the UK, but I'm primarily based here with the sun in Portugal.
And indeed, there is a bit of sun. If you're watching, you will see the beautiful view behind Hazel through her window. And the foliage is getting buffeted by the wind. And there's blue sky, which I have to admit, being currently based in Wiltshire in England, blue sky has been a little bit absent over the winter months, it has to be said. So great to see you, and I'm really curious about diving into more about this climate coaching, but we will go there in a moment. Let us get started with a question that we ask all of our podcast guests just to get us warmed up, which is, what is your earliest memory of being outdoors?
Yes, well, I actually, we moved to Zambia, Africa, when I was 2. So my earliest memories are actually sensory memories. Our whole life was really outside. And so I remember the color of the sunsets. The sounds I heard were things like singing and drumming. I remember the smell of rain, which I now know as petrichor, but I just remember that smell, the taste of mangoes, and also the interaction with animals, because we were out in the bush quite a lot. So really, my earliest memories were about being part of nature. Everything that came in was part of nature. And when we moved to Scotland later on in childhood, it was a totally different nature. So it had different memories associated, but I still always go back to those first sort of smell, taste, sight, sound kind of memories that I had.
Wow, that's amazing. Gosh, so much. And it's just so lovely as we go out, Hazel, all over the world. And Anna Marie and I were just talking recently, and you've just brought that all to life, that how we can coach outdoors in different environments. And you've just brought all all of those senses. You've just described them almost perfectly. The smells, the color, the taste of mango, and the interaction with animals, and then how Scotland can be so very different. So wherever we are in the world, we can coach outdoors appropriately, and you've just brought that beautifully to life with that very early memory, and that sounds amazing, and just fabulous. So moving on very naturally to the next question is, what is it that you enjoy about being outside?
Yeah, and I think it does link very much to that, because it's something really that just calms my spirit, and it's done that since I was young. If I was in emotional overload or I didn't know the answers, I would always go outside, because there I would find some of the answers. Or it was just be so beautiful that, I'd be in awe. It would take my breath away. So a lot of it has been about giving me joy. And I have a very childlike relation with nature. So it would be the unusual or the surprise element of nature. And I love that every day it's something different, something small will come in. And also, I think, as I've learned, the wisdom that nature gives us. I mentioned about finding answers in nature, but it's also that sense of belonging as well. It's that connection, and no matter what we see, there is a lesson there. There is some wisdom that nature can give us, whether it's the sound of a bird or a passing cloud or some of those things. So it really, a lot of it is the emotional expression that I get from it, and that sense of peace, that sense of well-being.
And this idea of play is something that myself and Alex were having a conversation with another podcast guest last week, Ashley Crocker. And by giving permission to clients to play and to go out and really evoke that childlike curiosity of wonder and awe at the world. And I do think that is something that outdoor coaching, partnering with nature, really, really does offer as a huge benefit. And bringing it back to your journey, hearing you describe yourself at this moment, it sounds like you have this portfolio of different, I don't know, associations, projects, initiative, roles, and it's always just interesting to backtrack and discover, how did you get to where you are now? Your coaching journey as a coach, and then what specifically drove that decision to work, with nature, and then particularly with the climate as well in a conscious perspective. And I'm aware that's quite a meaty one. There's a lot there, so take your time.
Yeah, the older I get, the longer the journey becomes as well. And yeah, I mean, I come from a family of therapists and teachers, so really working in communities at quite a young age. And my first job after university was in park events for a children's charity. So you talked about play. My early work was really about play development and how do we bring people into spaces to actually explore and play. So I would do events in big parks to get people into the parks and to have that environment. But it was also about getting local communities, often disadvantaged communities, into their local spaces and parks to be able to explore there, working with rangers, working with artists, with sports. It was a lot about community development and how we could interact with parks and natures. And then I went more deep into sort of community development in that way. And from there, going into teaching and coaching. How do we interact with people? How do we motivate people and engage people? And I started doing different coaching qualifications in things like sports and aerobics. And eventually I went into the complementary health field. So I became a therapist in different modalities in that way, which kind of expanded my coaching repertoire. I became a lecturer. I did adult education, teaching. I worked in hospitals. I worked on one-to-one with clients, and also teaching others. So I really kind of moved, although I'd had this whole nature background, it kind of moved more into the coaching part of it. And then my journey got totally thrown, where we went back to Africa, a different part in Africa. We went to South Africa. And there I thought, well, what do I do now? And I got involved in corporate coaching, so executive coaching, but teaching a lot of soft skills coaching. How can people better themselves? Looking at things like personal mastery, stress management, time management, those kind of areas. So that was one avenue that I went into. And then I also built on the therapies that I had learned and went into more kind of somatic therapies as well, craniosacral, did mindfulness, did my life coaching awards, and started to combine those two together. So the kind of corporate field and also the life coaching field as well. During that time, I also trained in some of the indigenous traditions, which was very more nature-based. So the Andean traditions, training with the Queros, the Incan tradition, and they have a very direct communication with nature. They work with this living energy. And this kind of led me into real intense nature coaching as well. So as well as the kind of corporate and the therapy, it was very much about how we work with nature directly. So I would take groups into the bush, for instance. We would observe animals. We would look at the emotions that came with being in the wild. I worked with equine assisted coaching. We would do labyrinths. So really taking all of those things together out into nature. I also worked with schools as well, with young people in schools. We would take children, large groups of children away scuba diving, for instance, for them to experience a whole other world and what that would give them, and different walking expeditions that we would do. And then I suppose I also had my one-on-one coaching. I was fortunate to live in a wildlife estate. So, I mean, there were so many ways to learn in that perspective. I was a children's therapist, a play therapist, so working with one-to-ones with children, but also families and adults as well. So that was 20 years in Africa, working with so many different unique ways of coaching. And because I'm just so curious, I would just follow the path and see where it would lead. And then 8 years ago, we moved from South Africa to Portugal, where I am now. And once again, I had to start all over again. And it was, what do I do now? There's not the corporates, there's not the clients. Where do I go? And so this is where I think nature becomes part of this personal journey as well, in terms of how it can help us in times where we need it. So in terms of what will I do, I decided to go back to university. This is now the third time going back. And I did a master's in mindfulness, because this is one area I wanted to go into in more depth. And was teaching from there, teaching mindfulness, teaching in schools, teaching groups, teaching parents on mindfulness. And while I was studying, I had to do my thesis. And I decided to do it on an 8-day journey walking the Camino de Santiago and doing an 8-week mindfulness course on the 8-day journey. So I'd done it with a trialed group, and in nature, it just came alive. It was so beautiful, the lessons that would come up in terms of, well, we're working with a space and we turn a corner and there was this amazing space. So I was going to do the thesis on this. And then 4 weeks before we were to go on this journey, lockdown happened. And suddenly that was it. I couldn't do that. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? I had a lot of research. I had 3 months now to put this thesis together. And so I really had to look and say, what is it that I know for me? What is it I love? And what is needed in this time of lockdown? And really, this is where nature coaching came in. So I changed my thesis and devised an 8-week course, which was nature-based mindfulness. How can we use the concepts of mindfulness, the practices of mindfulness, but with the nature connection work? And that really then formed my work to now, is working with this nature-based mindfulness. So I work online and also in person. I run retreats here using that. I teach in primary school, so I teach children. I have a 30-week curriculum based on nature-based mindfulness as well. And it's amazing when you just open to what is there, what then starts to come in, what nature gives you, what timing is there. So the journey is still continuing, I would say, but it's just been so many different pathways and different roadblocks, which then mean you have to go around and find a different pathway as well.
Wow. That's amazing, Hazel. Thank you so much for just sharing that. I mean, gosh, I think I could probably spend hours talking to you about unpacking all of that. That's that I mean, first of all, things that are coming up for me is your that starts with that playfulness of your curiosity, that almost child, in you wanting to explore and being curious. I mean, lifelong learning. There's this just lots of things coming out of there for our listeners to hear. And I guess it's this understanding that, you know, follow, what's in front of you, what your intuition, your heart, what interests you, because there's so many ways for us to work outdoors. And I think you may well have covered them most in your singular journey. I think that's incredible. Um, and we just recently had Kirstine, my wife, was on the podcast, who does she's an equine facilitated coach. Lots of those examples of you've given is just incredible. And thank you for sharing that journey. What absolutely incredible journey, and so rich. And of course, how COVID, you've used nature, was giving you the answers in that period when the world was, feeling that we all needed to, reach out and reconnect. And so could you, it really nicely kind of takes us into, first of all, I'm always just I've certainly read some of your stuff around, but I think it'd be lovely just to share with our listeners and watchers around, first of all, Hazel Tree Coaching, um, kind of like the analogy, and sort of that's, I think, is really interesting just to understand. And then perhaps a little bit more about your retreats and your programs that you're running over there. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, I have kind of two places. One is Hazel Tree Coaching, one is the Mindful Nature Connection. And the Hazel Tree Coaching, really, again, it was part of my journey of who am I? What have I got to offer the world? And nature was giving me these trees, and I was looking at the trees, and I was thinking of my name, and I thought, well, what is the hazel tree? And the hazel tree is the tree of knowledge. The nuts are the wisdom. The hazel is used as wands. And it just fitted so much. My quote at that time was, in terms of life, is the good life is inspired by love, and met with knowledge as well, created with knowledge. And those two things of the love of life and how to get wisdom, how to use this knowledge, and it did bring in this Kero view, the Incan traditions of building a relationship with certain aspects of nature, what is coming up for you in that time, and really working with that relationship. So the hazel tree I worked a lot with. When you look at Indigenous tradition and nature parents, we have our mountain, we have our river, we have our star. And the mountain where I was born near, incidentally, is called the Hill of the Hazels. So it was just such a lovely analogy to use in my coaching, that this isn't just about subjects, it's about bringing ourselves in, it's about personal mastery, developing ourselves. So a lot of my coaching programs on Hazel Tree Coaching are about that, about developing ourselves, whether it's communication, intelligence, the skills that we need to navigate, or about learning more about ourselves. And a lot of the journeys we took people on were part of that. The mindful nature connection then is really this nature and well-being aspect of it, the nature coaching, working with mindfulness. How can we then bring that into different ways of experiencing our life as well?
I just love it. Hazel Tree Coaching. And I'm always curious when we have guests on how they really bring to life their true essence and the journey that they've been on as a coach, as a nature coach, outdoor coach, mindfulness coach, however like the language is used.
Yeah.
And that then is brought into, you know, the business, which ultimately you are the business is a part of you, and how that is then represented through, you know, ultimately the name of the business, the logo, the branding, like that, all that piece, which when you're moving into this space, you know, you've got the coaching part, and then you've got like the business part as well, and how you have that as a reflection of you. And it's the stories behind it that really give an understanding of that person, that coach, and then ultimately how are they going to be in service to their clients. So no, thank you for that. And the logo that you've got as well is really, really beautiful. So I'd encourage listeners and watchers definitely to check that out. And just moving on to another part of your work that we've been really wanting to get somebody onto the podcast for a while to talk about, the Climate Coaching Alliance. It is such an important initiative, and the growth has been absolutely phenomenal. And particularly as the whole, you know, climate crisis, the ethics around it, sustainability is becoming, you know, more conscious, whether it's within, you know, corporate CSGs, and I know within the coaching space you're getting much more climate conscious coaches, and how that is brought into your work. And clearly you've been there since the beginning, so would love to get an insight into your perceptions of the bigger system, and, you know, where we're at, how we've got to where we're at. Definitely the Climate Coaching Alliance, and please do share to our listeners, you know, what's involved, how can they get involved, what support can they have, and then ultimately, like, moving forwards, like, what is your vision for the future, like, where is this going?
Yeah, thank you. And I think you know, you were mentioning being there for the beginning. I think it's something that people have had within them for a long time. My journey started with food, you know, in the 200s, you know, about eating meat and what's happening to our food, and world hunger, and those kind of aspects. I worked quite a bit with, you know, fast fashion. Where is this? So I think everybody starts in different ways, and I would grow vegetables, but I still wasn't very conscious. I would say I was doing things and I knew that these were good things for me to do. However, I think from a more of a kind of theoretical perspective, it was when I was doing this thesis and devising this program that I could see the link between mindfulness and nature connection, and what nature connection did. And it gave us a sense of care and compassion. But it was really interesting to find the research coming through at that time about how that linked to climate coaching and climate change and environmental behavior. And what research was just starting there, so I mean, it's grown exponentially in the last 4 years, was saying that the more mindful we are, the more we connect to nature, the more our environmental behavior changes. We become more involved in conservation. We change the way we interact with nature, because we only protect the planet if we save it, if we care about the planet. And that's what this nature coaching does, what the nature connection does. So a lot of people who are already working in nature coaching, you're already on that journey, because as people feel that they are part of nature, that their ecological self, as it's called, when you expand yourself to be part of nature, you can't damage nature because it is part of you, part of your family. So this is what got me intrigued into what is going on in terms of climate coaching, and where do we go from nature connection? How do we get to pro-environmental behavior? And so this is where I came across the Climate Coaching Alliance, which was set up just over 4 years ago. So it's very, very new. And it was set up to look at coaches who are working in all kinds of spheres and how the climate conscious conversations could be brought in to coaching in whatever sphere there was. So this is where the climate coaching now has, the Alliance has grown to over 3,500 members. It's very much a living systems organization. There is no hierarchy, there's no financial structures, there's no leadership system. We're all volunteers. Anyone coming in and offering is volunteers. Our membership is free. So it is a very different, it's not an organization as such, it's more of a movement where people can actually just come together in community and explore where they're at. How can this be taken into their practice? I started just by listening to a few of their events, and then I got involved in the festival, the annual festival. And then I became involved as one of the global coordinators, and I operate the seasonal heartbeat. So it's a year-round programs of all different offerings. We have community pods. So anybody can set up a community pod or run a community pod. It can be geographical based. We have 70 countries now represented where people meet together in certain countries. Or it can be a special interest pod. So we now have a nature pod, for instance, where we look at nature coaching and climate coaching. There is an eco-anxiety pod, for instance. There's so many different pods. I think there's over 30 pods now where people can come together. So we've just had a festival. We're now moving on to partnerships and collaborations. We're looking at compassion later on in the year. And it's open to anyone, whether people are coaches or not. But if there's something that's saying, I need to be more aware and I need to learn more about climate coaching or be more climate conscious in my coaching, then they can join. So there is a website, and it has the communities, it has the events, there's recordings of events, there's a forum, there's all kinds of things there that people can tap into.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Hazel, for giving us that overview. I feel like I've learned a lot more myself, and I do agree with you. People come through this through so many different ways. As you said, food. I think mine was certainly nature, trees, that type of climate consciousness. But I think you're right. When people connect with something or reconnect, we are part of nature. We always say that a lot on this podcast, that we're part of it. But when we reconnect with it, we care about it. We start to engage with it, and I think that's right. It's so lovely as well. It's good. I'm feeling reassured that I'm already on the journey as a nature coach in that sense. So that's great. But it's lovely to hear about how we can engage with it, the website, and we would encourage lots of our listeners, if you want to find out more about this, then absolutely jump on the website. And as you say, there's events and pods, and it's a growing movement, which is fantastic. And, we certainly would encourage everybody to look at that. So it brings us to, we always ask our guests as we're coming towards the end of the podcast, to resources. And I have a feeling there's going to be a rich tapestry as well, Hazel, of what you can recommend. But I'm intrigued with all of this learning, lifelong learning, this journey that you've been on personally, which is just amazing. What would you recommend to our listeners, and perhaps where would they go to start understanding coaching outdoors, being in nature, coaching with nature? What would you recommend?
I think there's the external and the internal, and the external is, I would say it's very difficult to say this one book is the book, because there are now so many books. So I would really say any book that kind of speaks to you, whether it's the title or the subject matter or the author. And I've got some on Kindle, I've got some on that I've bought. So for instance, at one stage, I was really looking at coaching with trees. So Peter Wallenben, he has so many resources on trees. At the moment, I'm into mushrooms. So, I've been on a few courses, and again, there are books on that. Anything with Joanna Macy, in terms of her active hope elements. And I mean, she has a whole work that reconnects aspect. From a climate coaching viewpoint, the book that the founders of the CCA wrote, which is Ethical and Climate Conscious Coaching, that is a wonderful resource for starting that journey, and they run book circles as well. I would also say look for local communities that are around you as a starting point as well. Look for teachers that you connect. There are so many, again, websites, but it may just be somebody you come across on a podcast, as you've said, or a website that looks interesting. Reach out to them and ask questions. So I think the online stuff is so rich, it can be quite overwhelming. And so I would say to people, start small, start with one thing, whether it's a tree, for instance, or whether it's a breathing with nature, and go down that avenue. But there's also the inner coaching, I think, which is the self-coaching as well. What is coming up for me at this time? What is it that I need? And use yourself as your own life coach in some way. Follow the path that starts to open up. Be curious. What does this teach me? If I have, say, a plant that appears for some reason, whether I see it or whether it comes into my mind, I research it. What does this plant say to me? Certain herbs have emotional meanings as well. Why have I seen that particular bird or that particular animal? And research the meaning behind. What does this say about my life? So they always say the teachers will appear. And these teachers can also be nature teachers as well as human teachers, and peer coaching as well, joining groups just to ask questions and listen to people and join the community. So I think community at the moment is very prevalent. I think some of the themes you mentioned earlier on, Anna Marie, in terms of that essence, authenticity is very prevalent at the moment in terms of finding our authentic self and then working in community. I think after lockdown, this sense of who can I connect to, what can I connect to, and working with that. So there are different external, there's different internal, and then as you've mentioned, I know when I do webinars, I do the courses. Also, if people want to phone me, I get a lot of people that just phone just to ask a question. Or one-to-one coaching. I mean, most coaches will have a coach as well. So we're all in this learning journey as well. So find a coach, find a teacher, a mentor, find a movement or an organization.
And thank you for those suggestions. And that just pick up the phone as well. Sometimes we hide behind messages and emails, and actually just picking up that phone and having a call, you can just really get a different type of connection there. And what does the future hold for you? You've kindly shared about your evolution organically and interest in various different areas. So what's next?
Well, as I said, I'm always moving into things. At the moment, in terms of my teaching with children, I tell stories every week about some aspect of nature. So I'm writing children's books at the moment to explain mindfulness and nature connection and climate conscious work. So I'm doing that as well. So quite a bit of writing, and also working with retreats as well, because I am in this beautiful nature space. So taking people on quite deep journeys for themselves. I do things like deep time walks, where you take people through the whole history of the Earth, the 4.6 billion years, through walking 4.6 kilometers. So there's always new things that kind of come up for that. So I mean, I do have a focus on young people and bringing them through this time, but also just all the wonderful ways, the travel, what comes up from nature, where I think, oh, that looks good. Let me work with that as well. So yeah, there's some immediate term, but long term, I don't know. It's just open. It's just evolving in that way.
See where curiosity takes you.
Mm.
Absolutely. Um, as we move to the end, Hazel, where can our listeners find out about you? Where can they go to find out some more? Because I'm sure, without any doubt, this podcast will have pricked some curiosity, and your energy is absolutely palpable. It's really lovely, and so I'm sure they would like to know, where do they go to find out a bit more about you and your work?
I think the best one is to go to www.mindful-natureconnection.com. In that website, then there's all the kind of aspects of the 8-week course, for instance, and also the children's courses and all of those. So it gives people a resource to see some of the topic areas as well. And by going on to that, if I'm doing a webinar, I've got another Coaching with Trees webinar, that's all free webinars. People can then come in on that and take some of the knowledge. So I think that is one main. And then if you're interested in the climate coaching, as I said, join the Alliance, join a pod. I'm in the Nature Pod, the Education Pod. All of those are places where people can meet. So yeah, please contact me, whether it's a question, whether it's a chat, whether it's a coaching, whether it's a course. All of these are ways to move you through your journey.
Thank you for that, Hazel, and I'm sure our listeners and watchers will be checking that out. Before we wrap up, is there anything that you would like to add to our conversation? Just creating an element of space for that before we close.
It's interesting you've used the word space, because I think this is a feature very much in our such busy lives at the moment, is we do need to create spaces and not immediately fill them. So for me, this whole nature connection is creating that space. And I think that's what your podcasts do as well. You create a spaciousness around these topics where people can just listen and can be and see what comes up from us as well. So often it's not about doing the courses or doing things, it's about being in that space and letting that essence come through. And I think the other thing is we're all just walking each other home, as the phrase says. So this sense of being with other people, being in community, being with the nature community is so important for us through this time. It's a difficult time. So if we can all work or walk with each other in this journey, it just collectively opens up so much love and so much compassion as well.
Collaboration at the heart of it. And indeed, I totally resonate with your comments there. Often when talking with other coaches who are keen to explore more about how to work with nature, it's what do I need to do? What are the techniques? What are the tools? And that's where the focus is. And it's that, okay, pause, come back to you. What is your relationship with nature? What are you curious about? What's at the heart of it all? And then a little bit the ex-British Army officer gets a bit pragmatic and goes, okay, what about the safety? What about the risk? What about the dynamic change? How are we going to manage that? And then just be within that moment. So no, thank you for your thoughts, and thank you for your time, and your
it's been a pleasure.
insights.
Yeah, thank you. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, no, it's such a pleasure to do this, and good luck with all the other podcasts because it's all needed. We're all in this space, so thank you.
Yeah, and all the other podcasts. Indeed, there are a lot more to dive into. So, listener, watcher, thank you for your time today. As ever, we are always interested in what are your thoughts, what resonated with you. Where are you on your journey? Please do get in touch on our LinkedIn community page. If you're not a member, come and hunt us out, Coaching Outdoors podcast. And if you are a member, just please do speak up and share. That would be amazing. We're currently at 1,300 members, and clearly we want to expand our reach. That is what it is all about. We're really on a mission to share the knowledge and wisdom of outdoor practitioners around the world who do this work in so many different ways. And I think that is part of the beauty of coaching outdoors or partnering with nature, is that there is so many different ways. It's such a diverse area. And if you're listening in, you will have your unique contribution to make as well. So get started. And if you're listening before July 2024, we have a real treat in store. Since the beginning, we have dreamt of having an in-person event, and it is coming alive in partnership with Henley Business School, which is just beyond our wildest dreams. So check your diaries for Friday, the 12th of July. And if you are free, we would love for you to join us there. We have got some amazing former guests coming and facilitating experiential workshops where we can all learn and connect with each other. So please do check that out. So with that in mind for today, it is a wrap. Thank you for your time. Enjoy whatever else you have in store, and look forward to seeing you again soon on another episode of Coaching Outdoors. So if you enjoyed what you've heard,
like it,
share across your network,
and subscribe to our YouTube channel and LinkedIn community page, the Coaching Outdoor Podcast.
Thanks so much in advance for your support.